Today, I'm showing you the making of yet more techno-adjacent tracks on the MPC One, but this time trying to push it a little more industrial, quite a bit more distorted, and a little more evil. Alright, so this started life with me just loading in a bunch of kick drums, hence the name of the project, mostly from machine kits, and throwing them around, making little grooves until something sounded cool. So here's what this sounded like originally. And I've got these sent to mute groups, so they cut each other off, and same deal with these. Then we bring in this, which is also a kick, if you can even believe it, although it's pitched up quite a bit. That's freaking brutal. But I'm using it much more as a snare. So I went in and cut a bunch of lows, and we get this. And actually, speaking of pitch, I've pitched all of these other samples around to match the key that I'm in, often measuring with my ears just to get it a little closer. So they're kind of bass one-shots as well as kicks. Plus, I have this sample that started life as a kick, but I've cut off the beginning both in the sample slicer and with my envelope. So here's what that gives us so far. Kind of a fun little groove, very much leaning on my background as a drummer here. But it's not all that in your face, and it's kind of cohesionless. So I started just using the tools available to me. Bit of soft clipper here, bit of soft clipper there, bit of decimator. Just dialed in by ear. Bit of soft clipper and tube drive. This one definitely needs some extra stuff to stand out. So once I had dialed all that stuff into taste, we got this. Quite a bit better, but we can take this farther. All of this is living in one drum program, so now I'm going to process that entire freaking drum program as one unit. So first of all, I have the Air Distortion plugin. Here are my settings. The mix level is not all the way up, it's about halfway up. So here's without, and then I'll turn it on. Without. With. That's doing a bit. I don't always love Air Distortion as a plugin, and I don't always love how it sounds, but it's adding a bit of life to these sounds. What I've really been vibing on is the Distortion Amp plugin, which is also a bit hit or miss, but in this case, holy hell does it go a long way. Check this out. Here's without. There's with. Without. With. It really brings those screeches to the forefront, which is exactly what I'm going for, and just dirties up these kicks in a really nice way. Brings these low-end heavy elements a bit more to the forefront. So once again, here are my settings. I don't have the dry wet turned all the way up. You could probably push this farther, although you will start losing low end. So I've got it parked at something reasonable, although your mileage will vary. So that's delightful. Then I copied this entire track and then compressed and low passed it. So I have this little sub layer that I've buried quite a bit because I don't want it to be too overwhelming. So here's without and with. pretty subtle, to be completely honest with you. Maybe not entirely necessary, but it seemed like a good idea at the time. Then I can do this fun little B section where I finally go 4 on the floor for that really fast, intense sound. I've been using this kick as my main kick, but then I think this one lends itself better to 4 on the floor and has this really sick tail. So we're just going. Maybe a bit cheesy, but all of these sounds layered are all driving the distortion and kind of melding together a bit, which I think works quite well. So hey, let's keep building and keep driving that distortion. We want this to dance on the border of sounding gross. So okay, I added some ambience. Wait for it. That's this one right here. I also have this that I didn't end up using, which is fun. Some hi-hats. So these are this 4 on the floor hat. And hey, let me just show you what that originally sounded like. This extra one, this offbeat hi-hat, all going through the distortion that's on this entire drum program. Then this one's fun. I've got an LFO here with my waveform set to noise, basically meaning random. So it's going to randomly wobble around, in this case, my pitch and my pan a little bit. So the pitch is going to be warbling about just a little bit in a frenetic way, and then the pan is going to be bouncing back and forth a little bit. And then we distort that to hell and back. So here's what that originally sounds like. And then here's that distorted. So that's kind of another piece of our loop, another energy level. Then I can add in this ARP, which I just did with 16 levels set to tune. I've got a bit of high passing here, a bit of reverb. And normally I think the reverb's default settings sound kind of gross, but in this case I left it mostly as is because sounding gross through that distortion, kind of sick. So all together. And then that can keep going for my second loop. Up next, I've got one more beat to show you. This one is not quite as driven or evil sounding as the first one, but it has a lot of the same kind of production techniques going on, so I figured I would bundle these two together. So, quite a bit of similar stuff going on here. A very tonal kick. Brought to life quite a bit by these two effects. And this is something I made using Synplant 2. In fact, quite a few of the sounds in this are stuff I made using Synplant 2. I probably need to do a kind of more in-depth video about it at some point. We'll see if I get around to it. And I've been pairing it with a kind of similar plugin called Visco that I've been using to make kind of dirty sounds like this. So, a very kick-centric groove that starts off not being 4 on the floor with other little one-shots like this. And I'm having this just going constantly. And I have this rumble sent to a mute group with this kick. So they can kind of switch off, and I can have this low rumbling going when the kick isn't going, plus little loops I've made for myself like this. This sample that I also made using Synplant 2 also has a delay built in from my DAW, and I am basically just fitting these little percussion bits into little pockets to kind of emphasize the groove that the kick is doing. Then I've got this 4 on the floor hi-hat to kind of help keep the central pulse. I'm doing this little polyrhythm thing. With this extra hi-hat, and similar to the hi-hat from the previous beat, this snare has the noise LFO on it, the pitch going quite a bit, and a very silly delay. And that just fills out the track. It's kind of like a swarm of bees, but a swarm of tiny little snare drums. Then I figured I should start to build on a little more harmonic content, so I pulled up Hype just to get the little ARP idea I had out of my head, and I ended up just modifying the default patch a little bit and using it mostly as is, which is kind of funny. I normally get kind of annoyed at that sound because it's kind of useless, except for when it's not, I guess. Then this dude, a lightly modified preset, and that works a little better over the 4 on the floor version. So then I went, okay, I need to very aggressively not get stuck in this loop and do a little alternate section, which is how I ended up with this glorious mess. So this is another self-made loop. This, once again, started life as some Synplant 2 sounds, and then I ran it through Infiltrator that kind of turns anything you feed it into a little break. But you'll notice that first transient doesn't actually start at the beginning here. There's a little gap here. And with this shifted forward like that, you end up with this just kind of cool percussion thing. There's a rumble. And then this extra element. Once again, something I made with Synplant 2 and built delay into in my DAW. And then I can bring back some of our other elements. And come up with an alternate arc part. Which is kind of fun and silly. Comically menacing, even. Which I think goes pretty hard once you switch to 4 on the floor. And I'm alternating between like a lower octave of that little riff and a higher octave. Just bouncing back and forth. Plus this ride cymbal with some ping pong delay and some reverb. And then I'm using 16 levels with velocity just to ratchet up that energy level and have it pump a bit. Kind of a frenetic little section, which of course is exactly the goal. If you'd like to see some slightly more restrained techno adjacent stuff on the MPC One, boy howdy have I got you covered up over here. If you'd like to see Synplant 2 and Visco in action, check out this video down over here. And if you'd like to get this thematically appropriate neon gargoyle shirt, hit up the link in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back with a new video in a little bit.